Hey everyone! Tonight we're going to take a long, weird walk into a piece of history no one asked for, but that might change the way you look at every museum, propaganda photo, and feather you've ever seen. This is the tale of Hitler's weird hat collection. That's right, plumes, caps, crests, feathers of all shapes and questionable origins. We're not talking metaphors here. We're talking actual hats. You're standing outside the Berghof, Hitler's alpine retreat. The moon is high, the stars twinkling, and the mountain wind howls like it knows you're not supposed to be here. But the door is somehow open, and you step inside. Marble floors, the scent of old tobacco and mothballs. No guards, just you and the hush of history. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's get down to business tonight. You pass the fireplace, duck beneath a tapestry, and reach a hidden wooden door. The kind with iron hinges that groan like they're in pain. You push it open and find what looks like a narrow walk-in closet. Only, it's not clothes. Not shoes. It's hats. Dozens of them, stacked carefully on mannequin heads. Each with a label, some handwritten, some typed. Most are gray or olive. But the feathers, oh, the feathers, explode in color. Raptor plumes. What looks like pheasant. A glossy black sheen from a raven. Maybe? And then, is that peacock? You hold one up. A brimmed Bavarian-style cap with a single red plume tucked into the band. On the tag, in loopy German script, Berchtesgaden, July 1934. Lucky. You can't help but laugh. Lucky? But here's the kicker. You've seen that hat before. Not in person. In a photo. Black and white. Blurry, but now you remember. He's on the terrace, hands behind his back, a dog at his side. And yes, the red feather. Bright even in grayscale. No one ever talks about it. Because let's be honest, when you're covering one of history's greatest villains, you focus on war, ideology, genocide. You don't focus on the fact that the man was possibly obsessed with accessories. Yet the evidence is right here. Another hat, this one tall, stiff, edged in gold cord. A falcon feather curls along the side like it's about to take flight. The tag says, Salzburg Performance. Wagner Festival. Reserved for Aria Nights. You look around, incredulous. Is this a prop room? A trophy hall? A shrine? One cap has 3 feathers, each from a different bird. It's heavy, weighted, designed to look official. Or imperial. You can almost hear his voice describing it to someone. A synthesis of the great empires of Europe, in one silhouette. Which is kind of what Hitler wanted to be. Isn't it? The sum of all symbols. The Kaiser, the Roman Emperor, the Crusader, but also the man of the people. And maybe a hat was how he shifted between masks. That idea sits with you. The military cap, the feathered Tyrolean, the steel helmet with custom gilding on the brim. Historical reenactors still argue whether this ever saw combat. Historians still debate whether Hitler ordered it for ceremonial SS parades or wore it in private as some kind of imagined relic of a lost Teutonic order. You spot something in the corner. A locked drawer, mostly hidden beneath a layer of crushed velveteen caps. It opens with a creak like someone waking up. Inside, One small box. It's lined with red silk. You half expect a crown or jewel. But instead, it's a child's cap. Soft felt, rimmed in green. A single white feather tied into the band with what looks like dental floss. The tag reads simply, Linz. First one. You feel a chill. You hold it in your hands and realize this might be the origin. The very beginning of the hat obsession. A childhood memory. Preserved in velvet. Was it worn for a school play? A village festival? Or did someone give it to him, an uncle? A tutor? A friend? What kind of child keeps a feathered cap until he's a dictator? Somewhere behind you, the house creaks. Maybe the wind, maybe not, but you put the cap back. Gently. And that's when you notice the mirror on the wall. Cracked. Dusty. You look in and see yourself. Holding that hat like it's dangerous. You look a little like him now. Just for a second. It's a horrible, eerie feeling. You shake it off. There's one last thing in this closet that catches your eye. A sheet of paper. A sketch. A design for a cap that was never made. Meticulous little notes. Height of brim. Density of feathers. Gold braiding to signifies celestial will. It looks like something from a fantasy novel. Or a cosplay forum. But it's dated 1941. Signed. A.H. You step back. Because what you're seeing isn't just fashion. It's a form of control. A manipulation of image. Every feather. Every stitch. Chosen. Meant to elevate. Obscure. Impress. Or intimidate. He didn't wear hats the way other people did. He collected identities. And in this small, strange closet, buried beneath the weight of history, you begin to understand that. Just a little. There's a final label on the inside of the door. You almost miss it. It reads, Property of the Führer. Do not disturb. You're in Linz now. Not the Linz of today. But a sootier, sharper version. Cobblestones rough underfoot. Horse carts creaking past. The Danube sluggish and gray. The sky seems permanently overcast. You're standing in front of a squat schoolhouse. Brick chipped at the corners. The year somewhere around 1898. The bell rings. And out he comes. A boy with the kind of tight-lipped scowl only 11-year-olds can master. You follow him at a distance. He's short, lanky, hair slicked in the kind of precise parting that says my mother made me do this. On his head, a hat. A Tyrolean cap, dark green, with a stiff, almost military band, but it's the feather, white, stiff. Probably goose or cockatoo. That flutters behind his left ear as he stomps down the street. This is Adolf. And no one's told him yet that feathers aren't armor. He's walking to a local park. Not really to play, but to watch the older boys drill. Military cadets in training. Teenagers shouting orders in neat formation. One of them wears a plumed cap, black velvet. Tall front. A silver insignia at the crown. You see young Adolf staring. Eyes wide. You can almost hear his thoughts. That's what respect looks like. You sit beside him on the stone wall. And he doesn't notice you. He's too busy sketching. Not people, just the hats. The crests. The feathers. Labeling them like a birdwatcher in his notebook. Two-color plume. Officer. Gold braid. Artillery. A girl passes. Laughs. Points. Feather chaser. She teases in dialect. He glares at her like she committed treason. Doesn't say a word. Just clutches his drawing tighter. Later that day. Back at home. He begs his mother for another hat. Not a new one, just his father's old police cap. The one in the bottom of the chest. He says it's for a play. She's too tired to argue. By evening, he's standing in front of the mirror. Goose feather sticking out at a wild angle. Saluting his reflection. You realize something strange, he's mouthing words. As if giving a speech. A rousing one. There's fire in his eyes. Not childish excitement. Something more, rehearsed. And then the hat slips. And he breaks character. Throws it on the ground. Starts rearranging the feather. It has to be just so. This continues for years. At art school, well, sort of. He doesn't last long, but he keeps sketching hats. In one of his salvaged sketchbooks, reconstructed from recovered fragments, there are pages filled with plume designs. Some echo Austrian military traditions, but others are clearly imagined: phoenix feathers, black griffin crest, things that don't exist. One shows a helmet with a built-in birdcage. You hope that was a joke. Historians still debate whether Hitler's interest in feathers and military headwear was rooted in personal insecurity or theatrical aspiration. Was he trying to dress the part of someone powerful? Or did he believe that symbols create power? Like a magician putting on a hat to become the sorcerer? Either way, the obsession was real. And it wasn't private. At 16, he gets in trouble at school for correcting a teacher's description of military ranks. Not with words, with drawings. He stands in front of the class and sketches his version of what a proper general's hat should look like. Complete with plume placement. The class laughs. The teacher doesn't. His punishment? Writing lines. But you know what he actually did? Designed a whole new ranking system of hats. You're not even kidding. You see one page. Tier 1. Straw hat, civilian. Tier 2. Bowler, municipal clerk. Tier 3. Felt with ribbon, mid-ranking bureaucrat. Tier 4. Stiff brim plus feather, authority figure. Public. And on until. Tier 10. Crowned eagle helm with twin peacock feathers, empire founder. Subtle. Later, as he gets older, the sketches stop appearing in school notebooks and start showing up in personal letters. He writes to a friend, August Kubizek, about a dream where he leads a parade through Linz wearing a great silver cap with the feather of Austria's soul tucked in its crest. You laugh, but it's not funny, because a decade later, he comes back to Linz in a motorcade. Different hat, but yes, there's a feather in it. Long, ridiculous, symbolic. The people cheer. One man, watching from a cafe window, turns to his wife and mutters, "He still wears that bird crap?" The wife shrugs. "I guess we're supposed to clap." You sit with that for a moment. Because this is how it begins. Not with goose steps, but goose feathers. One cap in a drawer. One kid who thought people would respect him if he looked like a general. You wonder, had someone just told him it looked stupid, would he have stopped? Probably not. Because it wasn't about fashion. It was about the illusion of rank. Even as a child, Hitler believed that respect could be worn. That if he found the right hat, with the right plume, and the right tilt, the world would stop laughing. They did, eventually. But not for the reasons he wanted. You're in Vienna now, but not the Vienna from postcards. No Schönbrunn Palace tours. No polite pastries. It's 1910, the grimy back end of the Austro-Hungarian capital. And Hitler's already failed out of art school twice. He's 21, broke, bitter, and renting beds by the week. You find him one evening hunched in the corner of a smoky cafe, Café Spurl or maybe Central. Hard to tell through the fog of history and cigarette smoke. The air smells like sour milk and damp wool. Everyone's talking politics or poetry. And there's Adolf. Sketchpad open. But he's not drawing buildings anymore. He's drawing people, sort of. Uniforms. Actually. Hats. Especially. One sketch shows a hussar officer's cap modified with what looks like ostrich plumes and a spiral crest. Another is a fantasy priest military hybrid wearing a mitre with peacock feathers jutting out like a weaponized bouquet. He's not just imagining leaders. He's designing theater. You lean closer. And that's when you see it. He's wearing one himself. A soft black artist's cap. Halfway between a beret and a newsboy cap. And jammed in the band, yep, a single peacock feather. You blink. Because it doesn't just look odd. It looks deliberate. Across the room, someone snorts. A voice. Trying to be Kaiser von der Zoo. Are we? Someone else laughs. Hey peacock, show us your colors. He pretends not to hear. But you watch him clutch the edge of the table. White-knuckled. His lips move. Silently. Rehearsing some comeback. A speech. A defense. But it never comes out. He finishes his coffee. Pays carefully from a coin purse with barely enough to cover it. And walks out into the Vienna cold with his feather flapping in the wind. That hat stays with him for months. People notice it. Some ignore him. Others jeer. One woman supposedly asked him in the market, "Are you selling birds or catching them?" He didn't answer. But here's the strange part, when he sketched himself. Later in notebooks, that cap always showed up. Even when his face didn't. He drew silhouettes. And the plume was the identifier. Historians still debate whether this period was the root of his fixation on visual rank, if in a city where he was no one, he thought he could draw himself into somebody. If every doodle was less a fantasy and more a prototype. By 1912, the feathers are getting stranger. One document found decades later describes Hitler being seen at a costume shop on Wiedner Hauptstrasse, arguing with the clerk about falcon versus hawk plumes. He wanted something that implied high watchfulness. The clerk reportedly said, "You mean spooky?" and refused the sale. He left in a rage. But not empty-handed. He bought a discarded stage prop instead, a hat that had been used in a Wagner production. Heavy with red and gold embroidery and topped with what he believed was a phoenix feather. Spoiler. It was dyed goose. He wore it to a nationalist rally. Just showed up in it like it was normal. No one knew what to say. Some whispered. One guy asked, "Is that burning?" Because the feather gleamed so strangely in the sun. The speech he gave that day was a ramble. More shouted than spoken. People were confused, unimpressed. But one teenager, a quiet kid named Rudolf Hess, reportedly said, "I don't know what he's talking about. But he looked like he meant it." That would be the secret sauce. Wouldn't it? Not coherence. Not sense. But costume. And here's your unorthodox factoid for the night. One of Hitler's early job prospects. Before the war, was theater costume assistant. He applied to a small traveling opera group. Mostly to design hats. Got rejected. Imagine that timeline. The Austrian operatic hat maker who stayed that way. But no. Instead, he wandered Vienna, still drawing, still sketching, and still obsessed with plumage as identity. He moved boarding houses often. But one landlord remembered. He had a box of scraps. Old ribbons. Feathers. He said they were inspiration. I thought he made dolls. When World War I broke out, he left Vienna and joined the Bavarian army. He left the peacock cap behind. But you can bet he brought the drawings. Because identity for Hitler, especially in those years, wasn't about who he was. It was about who he could become. And hats were the first draft of his uniform. As you leave the cafe behind and walk into the foggy Vienna night, you realize something. He didn't wear hats for the weather. He wore them like a mask. Like a weapon. Like a wish. And every time someone laughed, he didn't forget. He just added another feather. You're crawling through the trenches now. Somewhere on the Western Front. Mud up to your knees. Your fingers numb. It's 1915, and you're in a German position near Ypres. Crouched beside a lanky private with a mustache too neat for the circumstances. He's quiet, sketchbook tucked into his coat, next to his ration biscuit. When there's a lull in the shelling, he opens it and scribbles, not letters to home, not battlefield maps. He's drawing hats again, but now, they're different. Gone are the fancy feathers and carnival colors. What you see instead are sketches of soldiers, stylized, idealized, wearing iron helmets, sharp angled visors, and in the margins, notes. Add crest like Roman legionnaire. Feather impractical. Suggest plume motif etched in metal. Hitler's thinking like a costumer again. Only now the stage is war. The blood is real. But the hats still matter. You follow him for days. Dodging artillery. He isn't fearless. But he's persistent. Keeps his boots polished. His buttons straight. Even when everyone else looks like drowned rats. And once, during a rare sunny hour, he pulls a folded paper from his coat and shows it to another soldier. It's a design. A helmet crest. Like a falcon's beak. Arched forward. Stylized wings on the side. The soldier stares. Confused. What is this? For a play? Hitler just smiles. No, he says softly. For later. That's the part that makes your skin crawl. He doesn't see war as the end of things. He sees it as prelude. During the Battle of the Somme, Hitler's job is as a messenger. Dangerous work, running across fields, carrying notes between dugouts, but he refuses to wear his helmet unless ordered. It's badly designed, he mutters once. An officer's cap shows rank. Feathers? Long gone, but his obsession with visual dominance remains. He writes to a fellow soldier, describing a dream he had. In it, a vast hall full of marching troops, all wearing uniforms he designed. Their caps shone like eagle heads. He says, the crowd parted when they saw them. Historians still debate whether this dream was a delusion or a manifesto. But here's your quirky factoid. Hitler was offered a decorative plume by an officer once, just a joke. A ruffled feather taken from a busted pillow during downtime. He accepted it seriously, wore it tucked in his notebook for weeks. Symbol of honor, he called it. Everyone else just called it weird. Then comes the gas attack. You're back in the trench as the clouds roll in, greenish. Oily. Silent death. Hitler fumbles for his mask. He gets it on in time. Barely. But not before getting a lungful. Later, he writes that the gas smelled like betrayal. Not sulfur. Betrayal. After that, the tone shifts. His sketches grow sharper, more angular. He stops adding feathers, starts drawing helmets like steel crowns. Some have jagged wings on either side. Others, get this, feature what look like welded-on laurels. You don't wear these hats. You wield them. Back at camp, someone spots him sketching by candlelight. Still dreaming of your pageants? They ask. Half teasing. He doesn't even look up. No, he says. Blueprints. A few months later, Hitler is injured. Shrapnel. Minor, but enough to get him to a hospital for recovery. He takes the sketches with him. The nurse who treats him describes him as quiet, intense, and says he refused to let anyone wash his uniform cap. When asked why, he says, it still carries the shape of the front. When he returns to duty, he's promoted, corporal, still not much in the grand scheme, but he's proud. And you know how? He adds a stripe to his hat. Not officially, just stitched it in. Another soldier says, you can't do that. Hitler responds, they'll believe it if I believe it. That sentence should be carved into some stone. Because that's the essence of his theatrical reality. Not that things are real, but that they look real enough to make others obey. By the war's end, he's bitter, angry at the surrender, disgusted with the government, and when the Kaiser flees and the monarchy collapses. Hitler's main comment? They should have worn their crowns. You pause at that. Not, they should have fought. Not, they should have led. But, they should have looked like kings. Because to him, appearance is authority. The war breaks him, or maybe reveals him. He returns to Munich with a medal, a limp, and a notebook full of strange helmet sketches. And feathers? They're gone, but not forgotten. You're in post-war Munich now. And things are falling apart faster than you can track. The beer halls are boiling with rage. The economy is bleeding out on the floor. And every radical in Europe seems to have taken up residence in Bavaria. You hear gunfire, marching boots, rhetoric hot enough to burn paint off the walls. And there he is, your old trenchmate, now standing on a crate in a brown wool coat, barking at a crowd through cracked lips. His cap is pulled low over his eyes. Not a military issue one. No, this one is darker, flatter, sleeker. It's new, it's custom, and it's got something poking out from the side. At first glance, you think it's a badge. But when he turns in profile, your stomach flips. It's a feather. Not flamboyant, not flashy, just a single black crow feather, nestled into the band like a secret dagger. It isn't decoration, it's intent. That's the moment you realize, this isn't nostalgia. It's resurrection. He's testing the water, seeing what sticks, and you can tell the feather isn't random. Crows, after all, symbolize death, judgment, omens. It's a warning more than a fashion statement. You move closer, listening to the speech. He's weaving mythology with blame, history with theater. Germany must rise, he says. We have been humiliated not only in war, but in appearance, in dignity. Then he points to his own cap. This, he says, is the crown of the new German man. Not gold, not jewels, but willpower. People cheer. Some roll their eyes. But a small group, the young ones. Mostly, they lean in. You can feel it. The beginning of something sticky. Something dangerous. Here's your oddball factoid for the night. One of Hitler's early supporters, Dietrich Eckart, tried to convince him to ditch the feather. Called it too bohemian. Hitler refused. Let them talk, he said. A king is not crowned by consensus. Around this time, Hitler joins the German Workers' Party. Quickly takes over its messaging. Its look. He suggests uniforms, armbands, logos, and hats. Oh, he's back on the hat train in full steam. He shows a fellow party member a series of drawings, caps with braided cords, sharp visors, steel gray felt. One version includes a spike, borrowed from the old Pickelhaube style, but stylized into a flame. The member laughs. We're not a marching band. Hitler doesn't blink. We will be. Historians still debate whether these design obsessions were strategic or compulsive. Was he branding a movement or self-medicating with fashion? Either way, it worked. By 1921, he's officially the party's head. And with that title comes his first real order: standardize the look. Out go the random civilian coats and mismatched shoes. In come tailored brown shirts, military belts, and, yes, the first party-approved hat. It's modeled loosely on a mountain cap, with a slightly higher crown and a buttoned strap across the front. Hitler's version has a tiny flare, a silver pin with a stylized bird. A raven, some think. Others say an eagle. But the important part? Every member must wear it. You're at one of the early party rallies, watching the sea of caps bobbing in rhythm as Hitler paces the stage. He's no longer the kid in Vienna scraping feathers from the gutter. Now, he's orchestrating a costume drama across a city square. But here's the thing. He still keeps one of those old feathers in a drawer. A faded gray hawk feather. Flattened from age. Almost brittle. He doesn't display it, doesn't talk about it, but it moves with him. House to house. Like a keepsake. You find that telling. Because even while building a new empire, he still looks back at the fantasy blueprints. Remember how he once said feathers were symbols of unseen rank? Well, now he's giving that unseen rank to everyone. One cap at a time. You spot a younger party member copying his hat tilt. You see others mimicking the way he flicks it off before a speech. This isn't just politics. It's theater. And Hitler? He's the costume director. You're in a jail cell now, cold stone. Thick shadows. And the faint sound of ink scratching across paper. It's 1924. And Hitler is serving time in Landsberg prison for trying to overthrow the government in what history would call the beer hall putsch. But to him, it was the first act. And as you settle into the dim, musty cell, you realize he's not brooding. He's drafting. Not just Mein Kampf, although yes, that's being scrawled too. All furious slashes of pen and underlined phrases. But there, off to the side, in a little red notebook with rough pages, are more hat sketches. You're not surprised anymore. What is surprising is how organized they are now. Each design labeled, catalogued. You see variations. Officer caps with stiff peaks. Civilian supporter versions with quilted panels. Even youth division hats, smaller, with curved brims and a sleek wing motif stitched into the fabric. It's like he's designing a visual hierarchy from scratch. Feathers are still there, but stylized now, embroidered, metallic, symbolic. You pick up one page and read the heading. Uniformity is not surrender. It is power. Beneath it, a side profile of a hat with braided cords and a sharp fold at the front. Beside that, a notation. Falcon thread, silver. Not peacock. No more vanity. And there's your quirky factoid. Hitler's cellmate, Rudolf Hess, once asked him why he no longer used real feathers. Hitler's reply? I don't need the bird. Just the shadow it casts. The man is literally designing authority like it's a movie prop. But this isn't just fashion. This is an ecosystem of command. From the curve of a brim to the angle of a chin strap. He's creating an aesthetic that whispers order and shouts submission. And yet, he still gets theatrical. One design features a full ceremonial plume, black, white, and red, clearly not for field use. When Hess asks, who would wear this? Hitler says, at the Triumph Parade, the final one, you get chills. This man hasn't learned a thing from prison. He's planning parades before he's even out. And when he does get out, everything accelerates. You're back on the streets of Munich now. The economy's even worse, and the crowd's even angrier. But Hitler? He returns to public life with new energy and a redesigned image. He's cleaned up, sharper suits, calmer speeches. But the hat? Oh, that's where the change hits hardest. Gone is the mountain cap, the soft folds, the casual slouch. He now wears a sharply creased officer's cap with a leather visor and metallic cords. No feathers anymore, not even symbolic ones. But at the center? A custom insignia. A stylized eagle grasping a wreath. The hat screams authority before he even opens his mouth. At the first rally after his release, you notice something else. Everyone is wearing the same cap. Not similar. Identical. This is new. Before, uniforms were encouraged. Now they're enforced. Historians still debate whether Hitler's shift to rigid hat codes was driven by fear of disorder, or by the intoxicating thrill of total control. Maybe both. Because here's the detail you shouldn't miss. He starts assigning ranks via cap detail. Gold braid? Officer. Red piping? Political leader. Plain cloth band? Junior member. You've entered the era of visual fascism. It's not just about looking strong anymore, it's about knowing who is strong just by glancing at their forehead. You're at a rally in Nuremberg now. Tens of thousands marching in sync. Banners snapping, boots pounding. But you can't stop staring at the hats. They move like a tide. All those caps, tilted the same way, cords glinting, brims stiff as doctrine. And at the center of it all, on the balcony, stands Hitler. He's not moving, just watching. His cap, immaculate, catches the evening sun. And for one terrifying second, you realize, this isn't about vanity anymore. It's religion. The feather was a childhood talisman. The cap has become a crown. And he's turned every head beneath it into a believer. Now you're standing in the heart of Berlin, 1935. Just outside the newly constructed Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. The air smells like wet concrete and burnt gasoline. Banners ripple from the rooftops. Loudspeakers hum low in the background like a wasp nest waiting to burst. But your attention, as always, is drawn to the hats. You're watching a uniform inspection now. Rows upon rows of officers standing perfectly still as a high-ranking official walks the line. It's all brown, black, and silver, pristine fabrics, rigid posture, and above all, impeccable headwear. Each cap has been assigned by decree. This isn't about preference anymore. This is science. There are now over 20 regulated designs in the Reich's internal dress code, each corresponding to a rank, division, And even function. Border guards? Slightly wider brims. Political liaisons? Burgundy piping. The SS? Flat-topped black caps with death's headpins above the eagle. And Hitler? He's perfected his look. It's no longer a matter of which cap he wears, it's which version of the same cap he selects for a given appearance. Today, for example, he's chosen the parade version, silver chin cords, polished eagle insignia, slightly higher crown than standard issue. Not too aggressive, but not casual, either. Just imposing enough. You remember those old feather sketches? Well, here's your weird twist of the night. Buried in the archives of the propaganda ministry is a memo, yes. A real one. Asking whether decorative feathers could be integrated into youth uniforms for special pageants. Hitler's response? Feathers belong to savages, not future leaders. What a turn, right? The boy who once lined his shelves with plumage now dismisses it as primitive. He's traded the fantasy of birds for the mechanics of machinery. You can't help but feel a little sad about it. But that sadness doesn't last long. Because here come the Hitler Youth. Hundreds of them. Caps pulled low. Visors gleaming. Marching in rhythms so tight it feels unnatural. You see one stumble. Maybe 13. Maybe 14 years old. His cap slips a little. Not off. Just askew. Within 3 seconds, he's yanked out of the column by a supervisor and dragged behind a curtain. You never see him return. Historians still debate whether the obsession with visual perfection among the Nazi youth was a result of military indoctrination or psychological grooming. Either way, the hat had become more than a marker, it was a test. You wear it right, or you disappear. You flashback, briefly, to Vienna, to that scrawny, ink-smudged boy with a raven feather behind his ear. Would he have imagined this? Maybe. Probably. You're in the Reichstag again. This time during the Nuremberg Law's announcement. Hitler speaks for 45 minutes straight. Voice clipped and hard. And the moment he finishes, he places his cap back on before walking off stage. Not a handshake. Not a bow. Just a perfectly timed return of the crown. And here's the kicker. By 1936, Hitler has so fully absorbed the visual language of authority that illustrators working on propaganda materials begin drawing his cap before his face. In sketches sent to the Völkischer Beobachter, artists were instructed to anchor the shape first with the cap, eyebrows and jaw can follow. Think about that. His hat had become more recognizable than his features. You walk past a souvenir kiosk in central Berlin. They're selling porcelain miniatures of him, cap on, arms folded, postcards too. You flip one over and see the caption. Der Führer's crown. Subtle? No. Accurate? Painfully. He's not interested in fashion anymore. He's interested in immortality. And for him, that immortality has a very specific silhouette. A rimmed visor. A silver eagle. And a crown that no one dared to question. You're sitting in a converted railcar now. Rolling across Poland in 1939. The air is thick with smoke and frost. The windows fogged over from too many bodies crammed too close. But the officers in the next car? They ride in silence, boots polished, eyes forward, and there it is again. The hat, even in wartime, even surrounded by mud and death and diesel fumes. They still wear them. The caps remain spotless, rigid, almost sacred, as if dirt dares not cling to them. And then there's Hitler, standing in his mobile command post, gazing at a map so large it takes up the entire wall. He's wearing the cap. You recognize it immediately. It's the wartime variant. Same base design as before, but with minor adjustments. A narrower visor to make room for field binoculars. A softer interior for extended wear. A reinforced sweatband because long campaigns mean long hours. It even has a new sweat-resistant liner stitched from rayon and cotton. A detail he insisted on after complaining that his scalp would feel the heat of Europe. You almost laugh at the irony. But here's your quirky factoid. He had a set of identical caps sent to every theater, Paris, Prague, even the Balkans, so no matter where he arrived, his hat was already waiting for him. That's not convenience. That's stagecraft. Because now, every photograph taken of him shows that familiar cap. Always perched just right. Always casting the same shadow. Whether he's visiting troops, walking through conquered cities, or standing in silent smugness on a bluff outside Warsaw, it's always there. And that's not all. His generals begin mimicking it. They can't copy it directly, rank protocol forbids it, but the influence is obvious: creased bands, subdued piping, the same curvature of brim. The message is clear: be like him, but never equal. Historians still debate whether this shift in officer fashion was a conscious emulation or a subtle form of submission. After all, power flows from symbols. And what bigger symbol could there be than that cap? You remember a meeting in late 1940, somewhere deep in the French countryside. Hitler arrives late, surrounded by aides, but before he speaks, he does something odd. He takes off his cap, flips it over, and taps the brim twice with his fingers. Nobody asks why, but later, you learn something fascinating. This was a superstition of his. He believed that tapping the brim before a major decision would align the mind to the course of fate. One of his generals noted it in a private diary, calling it the conductor's salute to doom. That's a pretty generous way to put it. You follow him through Belgium, through Holland, through France. The train rolls on, the war machine advances, and the cap continues to evolve. For summer campaigns, it's relined with breathable gauze. For winter, fur-trimmed interiors. But always, the same outer shell, the same front-facing eagle and swastika, the same shadow across his eyes. It's not about practicality anymore. It's about continuity, consistency in chaos. While soldiers drown in mud and freeze in trenches, the Führer's hat remains untouched. His boots may get dusty. His coat may wrinkle. But that cap? Never. And when he steps off the train in Paris, yes. That visit, you're there. You see it happen in slow motion. The Eiffel Tower rises in the background. Cameras click like typewriters. And Hitler, small, stiff, dwarfed by the monument, stares up with his chin high. His cap catches the light just so. And for a brief second, it appears to gleam brighter than the city around him. You feel it in your gut. He didn't conquer France. He conquered the frame. And as the photograph is printed across newspapers from Munich to Madrid, you realize something. History won't remember what shoes he wore. But it will never forget that cap. It's 1941, and you're squinting across the Russian steppe. Boots sunk into ice-encrusted mud. The air is thin and cruel. The trucks are frozen. The rifles jam. You can't feel your fingers. And yet, there's Hitler, descending from his armored Mercedes-Benz at a field headquarters somewhere near Smolensk. He's in a heavy gray overcoat, gloves tight, face pale, and on his head? A brand new winter cap. It's fur-lined, sure, but still unmistakably his. That same eagle and swastika crest. That same exact curve to the brim. It's almost comical how out of place it looks here, like a museum piece dropped into a snowstorm. You remember the memo. The one his personal tailor issued in late 1940. All cold weather variants must maintain original silhouette under wind and frost. That meant layers of internal shaping wire to preserve the angle of the crown, even when soaked in snow or battered by Siberian winds. He never left visual control to chance. Here's your quirky fact. There was a dedicated hat valet on the Eastern Front, seriously. A man whose entire job was to carry duplicate caps in case the primary one wrinkled or blew off in a gust. He was later reassigned after Hitler reportedly snapped, "I don't want excuses. I want the right shadow on my brow." Let that sink in. While 500,000 troops were freezing to death, the Führer was tweaking hat shadows. Historians still debate whether this behavior was compulsive vanity, theatrical manipulation, or full-blown delusion. Spoiler: it's probably all three. Back inside the field bunker, you watch him consult with generals. The mood is tense. Supplies are dwindling. Moscow isn't falling. But Hitler refuses to acknowledge weakness. Why? Because in every photo taken that week, he still looks like he's winning. The cap sits centered, unshaken. In one famous photograph from that winter, Hitler reviews a map in candlelight. The rest of the room is dark, almost cave-like, but a glint of light hits his cap insignia, just a flicker, and turns that tiny swastika into a glowing brand. He didn't win the war in Russia. But he looked like he might. For a while. And that's the danger, isn't it? You step outside. The wind cuts like knives. You see soldiers dragging each other through drifts of snow. Hats pulled low over sunken faces. They're not wearing symbols. They're wearing survival. But Hitler? He still sees himself as a man on a balcony. A man with a shadow across his eyes. A man whose legacy can be tailored. You catch a glimpse of him through the frosted glass, adjusting his cap ever so slightly before facing the camera again. It's not just about image. It's about denial. And maybe that's the point of this hat story. The cap has stopped being a message to others. It's a message to himself. That he's still in control. Still composed. Still inevitable. You're underground now. Deep in the Wolf's Lair. Hitler's Eastern Front military headquarters. It's 1943, and everything smells like damp stone, cigarette smoke, and scorched ambition. The walls are lined with steel and pessimism. The air is thick with secrets. But still, above all, the hat remains. Even here, even now. It's propped carefully on a hook next to the Situation Room doorway. Custom-built hooks. Mind you, sanded and lacquered to accommodate only that one precise hat size. Nobody else dares place theirs there. You wait. He enters. And something's different. He's not wearing it this time. He carries it instead, holds it like a relic. The brim tucked into the crook of his elbow like it might snap in half if anyone breathes too hard. It's the summer model again. Even though the bunker is freezing. No scarf. No gloves. Just that single, Familiar crown of gray and silver. He places it down on the map table, like a pawn about to sacrifice itself. And that's when you notice the tremor. His fingers shake ever so slightly as he smooths the crown. Not from cold, he's sweating through his collar. You glance at the cap again. There are smudges on the visor now. Tiny ones. Like he's been gripping it too hard in private. Here's your offbeat factoid of the night. By this stage in the war, Hitler had begun requesting increasingly softer hat linings. Wool blends, velveteen, even silk, materials that would have made his younger, bootstrapped self gag. It wasn't about comfort. It was about reassurance. Historians still debate whether this shift toward tactile indulgence was physical decline or a psychological retreat into nostalgia. Maybe both, but it's telling. He no longer wore the cap for others. He wore it to remember who he used to be. Outside, officers move like ghosts through the pine forest. Reports come in: Stalingrad lost. North Africa collapsing, the Allies advancing, but Hitler still appears in broadcasts. Still filmed from below, still framed carefully so that his cap dominates the top third of the screen. The uniform doesn't change, but the man beneath it does. You catch him one night in a rare moment alone. No guards, just Hitler and his reflection in a foggy mirror. He's holding the hat with both hands, looking not at himself, but at it. You hear him mumble something under his breath. You lean in. He says, "As long as I wear it, I am not defeated." There it is. Not defiance. Delusion. This man, who once curated a plume collection to feel royal, now clings to a military cap as if it holds back the tide of history. And it gets stranger. In early 1944, during an inspection tour, he visits a munitions factory. Workers are lined up. Cameras flash. His hat? Missing. He wears a helmet instead. It's the only time on record he does so. And the footage is awkward. His posture slumps. His voice falters. He looks, if only for a second, like someone wearing someone else's skin. That day, the hat stayed in the car. When he returns, he puts it back on before entering the next room. And, poof, posture corrected. Tone hardened. It's as if he couldn't bear to be seen without it again. You wonder, does he even remember why he started wearing it this way? The feathers, the fantasy, the early flair, it's all gone. Now, it's just a husk, a hollow crown for a hollow man. But still he clings to it. Still believes in its power. Because in his mind, he's not a collapsing dictator surrounded by fire. He's still the man on the balcony. The silhouette in the spotlight. The cap in the frame. You're in Berlin now. And it's 1945. The city is crumbling around you. Buildings collapsed like half-burnt books. Ash swirling in the air like snow that forgot how to land. Every footstep echoes against ruin. Every breath tastes like brick dust. The war is ending. But the hat? It's still here. Still perched on the coat rack in the fear bunker. Same brim. Same insignia. Only now it looks tired. Like even the fabric knows this show is nearly over. You pass by it every morning as he shuffles from his sleeping quarters to the map room. He barely glances at it now. Doesn't always wear it. Sometimes just lets it sit there. Suspended. Waiting for a world that no longer cares. But one day, maybe out of habit, maybe out of superstition, he takes it down. He puts it on. And you swear, for a moment, he seems taller. That's the magic, isn't it? It's the only thing he has left. By now, you know this cap isn't just headwear. It's a coping mechanism, an extension of self-image, a ritual object. You've seen him place it on his head with the same gravity a priest might lift a chalice. But even priests lose faith. Here's your odd detail of the day. The hat he's wearing now? It's not one of the usual field service caps. It's a new one, quietly made, no flamboyant braid, just matte wool, toned down piping, the silver eagle polished so lightly you almost miss it. He had it commissioned in secret, just a few months ago. Why? Historians still debate whether it was an attempt to project humility or a signal of retreat. Some even speculate it was a subtle cue to allies. A visual whisper. I am shrinking. Whatever it wasn't fooling anyone. Not Goebbels, not Bormann, not even the trembling adjutants running maps through candlelit halls. And you, yes, you feel the shift. Too. The war room is quieter now. Not silent, just resigned. Like everyone is watching the last act of a play they already know the ending to. The cap no longer holds power. Only memory. You catch a glimpse of it resting on a table one afternoon, half lit by the flicker of dying bulbs. It looks smaller than before. Maybe it's the angle, maybe it's your imagination, or maybe it's just the world catching up. Outside, Soviet artillery thunders like distant gods. You flinch. He doesn't. He's wearing the cap again now. But it's no longer an accessory, it's a shield. In April, he's seen less and less. He disappears into private rooms. But whenever he emerges, the cap is there. It's never crooked, never dusty. Even in a bunker where water leaks and mold creeps. That cap is spotless. You want to laugh. But all you can do is stare. And here's something you didn't expect. He starts sleeping with it beside him. Folded neatly on the nightstand. As if he might need it at a moment's notice. As if a final photograph might still be taken. As if there's still something left to preserve. You don't ask about it. No one does. Because at this point, questioning the hat would be like questioning gravity. And so it remains. Until one day, quiet. Without announcement, it disappears. You enter the room, and it's just gone. Folded coat. Yes. Gloves. Boots. But the cap? Not on the hook. Not on the table. Not even beside the bed. No one speaks of it. No one needs to. Because deep down, everyone knows what that means. You're still in the bunker. It's late April now. And the silence has turned from thick to thin. Thin like the last stretch of tape in a cassette. The end of a candle's flicker. You can hear footsteps 2 rooms away. The scrape of knives on tin plates. The constant distant hum of dread. The cap never reappears. You check twice a day. Then stop checking altogether. Hitler still walks the halls. But less like a leader and more like a looped recording of one. The iconic posture is there. The clenched hands behind the back. The muttering, but without the cap. It's like the role no longer fits him. He's miscast in his own finale. You remember him standing before a wall map now torn and frayed. He stares, but doesn't seem to see. Without the cap on his head, he looks shorter, not physically, maybe, but in stature. The gravity's gone. The angles of his profile collapse under the weight of bare reality. Here's your weird detail of the night. At one point in the last days, an aide offered to retrieve his main field cap from the wardrobe room. He refused. Said something strange. It doesn't suit this version of me. And that lands like a hammer. Because what version is left? Historians still debate whether this line was metaphorical, a crack in his self-image, or something darker, evidence of a man beginning to perceive his own myth as a costume. Maybe, for once, he realized the hat wasn't magic. It wasn't armor. It was just cloth and thread. Maybe he knew wearing it now would only emphasize the failure. Instead, he appears bareheaded more and more. The infamous hairline exposed. No shadow on the brow. Just a pale man pacing out the seconds of a legacy that's rotting from the inside. You can't help but compare it to those early years. Remember when he added feathers? When he strutted in mirrored halls in Munich? When he ordered hat brims to match camera angles and cap cords to whisper authority? When he wore the cap like a crown? All gone. Now, when he walks, you notice a twitch in his left eye. When he speaks, his sentences trail off. And when he sits at the dining table, it's always the same meal: bland noodles, vegetable broth, a glass of water that trembles with each rumble above. No one jokes anymore. Even Goebbels is quiet. You walk past the wardrobe one evening and find it open. Most of the uniforms are still there, pressed, labeled, arranged like relics for an unwatched museum. But the caps? Just two remain. Neither worn in years. Not the one. That one, you learn, was given to a valet. Or maybe burned in a stove. Or maybe folded into a box that now lies buried under 1,000 tons of concrete and dust. Historians still debate what actually happened to it. There are theories, rumors. One says he buried it in the garden behind the chancellery with a final letter. Another says Eva Braun asked for it to be destroyed so no one could ever wear it again. A third suggests it's still somewhere in Moscow, quietly labeled and locked behind a glass case. But you think it's gone, disappeared in the only moment he lost control. Because by the time May rolls in, he's not thinking about symbols anymore. Not uniforms, not crests, not the careful construction of his silhouette. Only endings. And it's in this raw, hatless silence that the man reveals himself. Not the icon, not the leader. Just the hollowed-out creature that had once used a cap to pretend he was taller. Sharper, stronger. You look at him one final time and realize he doesn't need a cap now. Not because he's above it, but because even he knows. The performance is over. You wake to sirens. The concrete ceiling above you groans like it's trying to remember the sky. You smell oil, mold, and the acrid aftertaste of cordite in the stale air. You're still in the bunker. But the walls seem closer now. Thicker with pressure. You move slower. Not because you're tired, but because time has changed. And just down the corridor. So has he. Hitler's footsteps used to echo like drumbeats. Now they drag. No cap. No gesture toward performance. Just that same tattered wool jacket. Buttoned wrong. His hair uncombed. He doesn't glance at the mirror anymore. You peek into the room where he sits, his study. Though there's no studying anymore. Just muttering. Just silence. And above all, absence. The cap would usually rest on the desk. Front and center. Now, it's gone, and in its place? A shallow ashtray. Half full. Still warm. The hat, you realize, was the last remaining line of separation between the role and the man. And now that line is gone. Erased. The dictator has melted into the human. Or at least, what's left of one. You watch him sign a document with trembling hands, his last will. His signature looks like a frightened insect caught mid-run. He doesn't lift his head, doesn't speak, and when the last visitors come, Goebbels, Bormann, Eva, he doesn't greet them with a stiff nod, or a salute, or a quip. He just gestures weakly to the chairs. No symbols, no facade. Here's your odd fact of the night. The last cap ever seen on Hitler's person wasn't even his. It was an older, flatter piece, likely borrowed, likely incidental. Some eyewitnesses claim he tossed it on a chair and never picked it up again. Others insist he wore it for one final moment before entering his private quarters with Eva. But no photographs survive, just memory, conflicted, contradictory memory. Historians still debate whether that final moment involved any deliberate staging. Did he try to reconstruct the image? Adjust the folds of his jacket? Comb his hair into that familiar wave? Or did he simply sit down, worn and cold, and decide, finally, not to care? The answer's blurred. What you do know is this. By the time the last sound echoes through the bunker, the muffled thud, the crack of something irreversible, the era of the hat is over. Outside, Berlin burns in shades of orange and gray. The Soviets are 3 blocks away. And down here in the bunker, someone, maybe you, maybe another aide, gathers the last of his belongings. A notebook, a photo, a revolver, but not the hat. It's nowhere to be found. And that's what you remember. Not its absence, but its retirement. Like a prop taken off the stage. No longer needed, no longer relevant. Because here's the real kicker. Even the most notorious symbol loses power when the person it elevated forgets how to wield it. The hat didn't die in fire. It faded in silence. And maybe that's the only fitting end for a man who believed that feathers, visors, and eagle pins could rewrite fate. Because in the end, they couldn't. You're standing in the ruins now. Berlin is ash and fog. The sky above is just smoke pretending to be cloud. You're no longer in the bunker. You're out in the world again. If it can still be called that. It's May 1945. The Reich is over. And the question you keep asking yourself, maybe not out loud, maybe only in that small voice that lives just behind your ribs, isn't about war, or politics, or legacy. It's about the hat. What happened to all of them? You were there. You saw dozens, parade hats, hunting hats, alpine fedoras, peaked officer caps, the strangely curved one he wore only during inspection tours in the Sudetenland. And those with feathers, remember those? The long ones, the odd ones, ostrich plumes, peacock fronds. One hat had an entire gull feather woven through silver braid, like a warlock's accessory that lost its script. Now they're all gone. Not one made it out of the bunker with you. But here's your final quirky tidbit. One of his hats did survive the war. Or so the story goes. A Soviet officer reportedly found a tattered cap, olive green, sweat-stained, rims slightly scorched, in the debris of the Chancellery garden. He took it back to Moscow. No one believed him. Years later, it showed up behind glass, in a basement museum, with no plaque, just a tag with 3 words in Cyrillic. Kepka, 1945. Berlin. Cap. 1945. Berlin. Historians still debate whether it's real, whether it was his. You'll never know for sure. But somehow, That's fitting. Because now, the hats are myth. They've joined the pantheon of historical artifacts that mean more than they ever should. Like Napoleon's sword, or Lincoln's stovepipe, they were never just objects. They were performances. And performances have encores, until they don't. You visit a bunker museum once. Decades later, the walls are sealed now. The room's clean, sanitized for tourists and awkward school groups. In the display case marked "Personal Effects," you see a replica. A cap almost like the one you remember. The brim's too wide, the eagle's wrong, the shade of gray leans too blue. But it's close enough. A man next to you whispers to his son, "That was his hat." You want to correct him. You want to say, "No, that one had softer stitching. The real one had wear lines along the band from how often he adjusted it during speeches." You want to explain the shift in shape from 1938 to 1941. You want to tell them about the feathered caps. The ones no one talks about. The ones that weren't military at all. But you don't. You just stare at it. Because the truth? The truth is, the hats outlived the man. Their story goes on, flickering in museum lights. In bad documentaries. In conspiracy books and late-night YouTube spirals. But you were there. You saw the last one worn. And the moment it came off,